Hey look everybody, it's the kick-spamming lady with red hair and dark skin and green accents and brown fingerless gloves who was put into the game specifically so that noobs would have a chance to keep up. Giovanna. Do you think Giovanna has a tramp stamp too? I kind of feel like she does. You can sort of tell she's a bit of a freak, you know, she's got game, which I don't have a problem with. As you know, I'm no hater. It's just kind of funny that round, brown, very easy to understand tits are apparently all the rage in casual fighting game character design. This is a video of me playing Giovanna the other day, by the way. I actually really like this character. She's a bit of a basic bitch, but then again, so am I. I haven't played Strive that many times yet, and I didn't play the beta, but I feel like I'm finally starting to do okay, winning a majority of my matches, ranking up a little bit, you know, using all the major mechanics, which is so exciting because I gotta be honest, I was ready to give up on this game. It felt very overwhelming as someone who has a background mainly in 3D fighting games like Tekken and Soul Calibur. It also didn't help that people keep saying that this is a dumbed down, very easy version of Guilty Gear because it didn't feel easy to me at all. But it really is true that if you just give it some time and have fun with it, it starts to make sense really quite quickly. Tekken 7 has sold between 7 and 8 million copies by now. I think Guilty Gear Strive is sitting somewhere between 300 and 400,000, which makes it a really big success by its own standards, but it's still true that Tekken is a much larger culture. But Tekken 7 is also kind of old by now, and I think many of us, and maybe I should speak for myself, are kind of tired of it and tired of the people who make it. But I also feel like fighting games kind of die heroes or live long enough to see themselves become villains, unless I guess they come out and just suck ass, you know, like Marvel Infinite. But it's definitely true that we're in the honeymoon phase with Strive and about ready to divorce Tekken, or at least bored enough to have an affair behind its back with some sort of anime game. But I feel like maybe that's not such a bad thing. At least for me, it's a real breath of fresh air. And I remember when I got into Soul Calibur 6 for a while, how much fun that was and how it allowed me to come back to Tekken with more positivity in my heart and a pair of fresh eyes. You know, travel broadens the mind, so I really want to encourage as many people as possible to try Guilty Gear Strive. But that's not going to be easy if it's your first 2D fighting game ever, as it was for me. I at least had the good fortune of coming to 2D with a layover in Elisa, so I had, you know, some understanding of special cancels and DPs and stuff like that. But I'm not good enough at this game that I can teach you how to play it well yet, but I can definitely sort of break down that initial experience for you in terms that are going to make sense if you are a Tekken player, especially a Tekken player trying to maybe make that leap into a 2D game for the first time, giving yourself a break. So that's what I want to do in this one. I'm going to give you some tips to help you get started. I think one of the main challenges for Tekken players trying to learn Guilty Gear is going to be finding and then learning a character, because from the perspective of a Tekken player, character design in Guilty Gear is completely insane. And I'm reminded of something that Eris said a long time ago about Soul Calibur that I think is really true, how in Soul Calibur you can really end up with a character that isn't right for you, that isn't your style, and that isn't really true with Tekken. In Tekken the characters are different and they play in different ways, but they are attempting to do very similar things and they have similar toolkits. They're all going to have a move at 10 frames, they're all going to have a launcher for 15 or 16 frames, they're all going to Korean backdash and wall splat and so on. In Soul Calibur things are a bit more distinct, but in Guilty Gear it's cranked up to 11. It's insane how different these characters are. They don't even feel like they're from the same game most of the time. They don't even control or move in the same generic way. So imagine if we had a character in Tekken that just couldn't backdash, you know? If we had a character whose basic jab was a projectile. It gets kind of mad like that. So I think it's really important to explore in this game. I've played all the characters so far. I've taught myself how to combo with all of them. I want to understand what makes them tick, you know, because the main thing I'm interested with these fighting games is character design and the different things you can do with that. But when you start out with Guilty Gear, most people will tell you that you should start with either Bad Boy or Soy Boy, because they are generic for Guilty Gear characters. They have all the major mechanics, they have the basic movement options, and they also don't require difficult execution really. But I kind of want to add two other recommendations to that list. The first one is Giovanna, who we talked about a bit earlier. Now, the reason I think Giovanna is so good for new players is that her game plan is really easy to understand, and then you can start applying it right away, which means that you can learn the game while playing matches against other players, which is very useful and very different, I think, from sitting in practice mode, which is also useful, of course, in its own way. So with Giovanna, you have a couple of multi-hit moves. Your slash and down slash, or I guess 2 slash. You have to learn keypad notations when you want to read notations for this game, which is annoying as a Tekken player, but you know, no helping that. But they are multi-hit moves, which means that they are very easy to hit confirm, and when you hit confirm something in Guilty Gear, that's when you can cancel that or keep going, and you can create a combo. So it's kind of teaching you how to combo really easily, and then you have easy to perform and fun to do combos, which I think is really great. A couple of options that you want to do when you're jumping, and then 1 or 2 big options for gaining plus frames on block, so you can keep creating pressure. So I think very, very easy for new players to sort of get into what the game feels like and the sort of melody of it. And the other recommendation is Anji. Thing about Anji is you have all these crazy characters in the game, and then you have this kind of boring looking dweeb in blue pajamas. I think they probably had a meeting, you know, talking about what they should do to make him look more interesting, and they just decided to give him like insane abs, like magical abs. He has like 27 abs. It's some sort of abmancy. Now, Anji is supposed to be like a bit more advanced than the other basic characters, but I think he's going to appeal specifically to Tekken players because he revolves around something that we kind of specialize in. He revolves around a stance mix-up, or kind of a Guilty Gear version of a stance mix-up, his Fujin. Fujin is going to look like a big and complex move by Guilty Gear standards, but if you compare it to something like Scarecrow or Savage from Tekken, it's just a very basic, easy to understand stance or move with a couple of options. You have an option that you mix with another. You have one option that gives you, you know, plus frames so you can keep going, and then you have like a tricky movement option that you can use to set up jabs. So it's really Tekken-y, and it's going to feel good, I think, for Tekken players. And then he has a couple of cool, you know, sort of parries or evasive moves. That's kind of his flavorful thing. But I think he's actually more basic than he's given credit for, and he's really easy to pick up and play as well. Another thing I really wanted to talk about that I think is going to be really uncomfortable for Tekken players is the fact that Guilty Gear Strive is a very, very aggressive game. It really encourages you to do a lot of offensive things all the time, and that's so different from Tekken. It's basically the opposite of Tekken. When you're trying to learn Tekken, people will tell you, don't worry too much about attacking and damage and combos, be patient, move backwards, look for opportunities. But in Guilty Gear Strive, you can't do that. If you backdash too many times in a row, the game will actually punish you by taking away your meter, and you can't allow that to happen. Meter is so important in this game because you can use it for a million different things. It's what allows you to do long combos. It kind of enables your equivalent of spin moves, I guess, which allows you to continue combos, but you can use it for defensive options. It's just extremely, extremely important. So while it's going to sound very strange and like bad to a Tekken player, I think a good way of getting into the pace of this game and learning it is actually to just attack a lot and do a lot of moves and not worry too much about them being too big or the wrong moves, but then kind of try and find out what works by trial and error. And then of course when you run into somebody who knows what they're doing, try and emulate that, go into practice mode, try and find out why they made certain choices and so on. But what that creates for new players that becomes really big is you start playing matches and people just ragdoll you. They run through you in seconds and you're not even really able to enter the round. And the really important thing that I had to learn here, it's uncomfortable at first, but it's so important, is that in this game, you have to attempt to interrupt the opponent. And this is built into all the move lists. So when somebody is attacking you with crazy pressure, jumping in the air, doing all these special moves, there are always holes in that offense where you can interrupt them with a fast attack and get a counter hit. And when somebody's applying a lot of strings against you in Tekken, you know, There are windows for interruption, but usually that's super dangerous. We're more about, looking for the low that we can low parry, or maybe the high that we can duck, or maybe, sidestep, something like that. But in this game, you have to try and interrupt. And unfortunately, that means that you just have to learn these matchups and learn where those opportunities and holes are. Luckily for now, the roster is quite small, so it's not that difficult to do. And there are a couple of good missions in training mode that will show you some of these opportunities as well. But a really big tip that I want to give you is that you have a generic move with all characters. It's the same notation, the notation that we would call forward 1 in Tekken. And this is your generic fast go-to anti-air move. Anti-air is important in this game because when people come in jumping or flying through the air, that's usually overhead, which goes into how mix-ups work in this game. Maybe we'll talk about that in another video, but just know that you have that, and when people are like lunging or jumping forwards, it's a really good opportunity to throw that out and getting them off you. Down 3 or 2 kick, I guess, in Guilty Gear notations is another good like generic option when you need to do something fast and just get out of this pressure. So again, experiment with trying to interrupt the opponent in certain situations and just try and, by trial and error, find out what works and when you can do that. But don't stand around and like wait for it to be your turn, the way we would do in Tekken, you block something and now it's my turn, because it doesn't really happen the same way in this game. Finally, I wanted to talk a bit about mechanics and combos, and this was really big for me when I started this game. It's kind of the point where I felt like giving up a bit because it gets pretty confusing. You have 4 different colors of the Roman can, so you've got a burst gauge and a tension gauge, and depending on what character you play, even more gauges and mechanics, but it's actually not that bad. I think if you start with the most basic stuff, you can pick up the rest as you go along. But the first thing I recommend that you experiment with as a new player is comboing using red Roman cancel. So that's when you hit the opponent during the hit stop. You press the Roman cancel button, your character flashes red, sends out a little shockwave, and if that hits the opponent, it sort of freezes them in the air, hangs them there, and you can continue your combo. So this is the thing I said earlier, is kind of like spin in Tekken, and the really cool thing about it is that you can turn almost any hit in the entire game into a combo using this, so it's extremely versatile. And there are great combo videos for all characters on YouTube already, so you just watch them, you copy them, you try and understand how and when they use the cancel to get their combos, and I think pay special attention to any combo that starts with a low. They even say in the mission mode of this game, the sort of tutorial, that learning how to combo off of lows is like one of the major ways of becoming a dangerous player, because then people really need to worry about you. In Tekken, we don't really have unseeable low launchers, or when we do, they come with a major downside because otherwise they are so powerful for mix-ups. But in Guilty Gear, it's considered completely normal to have a fast unseeable launcher turn into a full combo, so you can see the great potential that has for creating these massive damage spikes, and then you can on top of that start to build your mix-up. So I think it's really important to use the red Roman cancel when you begin doing combos, and specifically combos that start with lows. The other thing is the burst meter. So this is the blue meter that you have underneath your health bar, and this thing is used for breaking out of the opponent's combos. And the thing about this meter is that it doesn't like build the same way bar usually does in fighting games. It just kind of builds up slowly on its own, which means that you want to use it as early as possible. So as a general rule of thumb, when you're new, when the opponent does their first combo on you in the match, you use it right then and there, and then you have more time for the bar to accumulate back up so that you get more uses. It's good bar economy. Roughly you're going to get like 1 per round, but if your opponent is using this and you aren't, it just means that you're going to have to combo them twice as many times to do the same amounts of damage. So just a really important thing to keep in mind. And it's also good when you're getting ragdolled as a new player to have a way to escape. There are other ways, of course, using, the different guard options, and there's a defensive Roman cancel that you can use as well. But I think if you can burst and you can combo with red Roman, then I think you're going to do quite well when you're starting out. So yeah, those are some tips I wanted to give you. if you are one of the 7 or 8 million Tekken players looking for a vacation and looking to do something new. I really recommend it. I think it's a great and a fun game, and even though Tekken will definitely remain my main game and something that I always play, I really think it's good for me, even as a Tekken player, to do something different on occasion. So I hope I see you in Guilty Gear Strive. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys again very soon.